Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have Aaron Zuckerman, songwriter and producer. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm great, man. How about you?
I'm doing awesome. So getting right into your story, you grew up where and what first got you into music?
So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh,
And
go
I
Cards.
started, yeah, go Cards. That's right. You're a Cards fan, right?
Yes, sir.
I love that. We had a rough year, but
I
it's all
know.
good. Yeah, I grew up in St. Louis. I studied classical piano growing up. That was like my main thing that got me into music, and I didn't really even know what being a producer was or anything like that. Um, so the way I figured that out is I was at a summer camp in at Berklee College of Music. If you've heard that,
Yeah.
um, they had like a 5 week program, and my roommate was just like, "Hey, I know you're here for piano, but you should check out like what a music producer is." I was like a sophomore in high school, and literally I remember reading like a Wikipedia on a music producer and being like, "Oh man, this is it!" Like as soon as I read it,
hmm
and yeah, I've kind of been chasing it ever since.
Now, growing up, what kind of music was getting played around the house that is kind of your first memories of music that kind of made you feel an attachment to it? And then in high school, what were you listening to that kind of made you fall in love with music?
Okay, I specifically remember listening to "Lose Yourself" by Eminem and
Yeah.
being like, "This is the craziest emotion. I have to figure out how to be a part of this." I must have been like in third or fourth grade when that song was like kind of on the radio, and I just thought that song was incredible. It just felt like I don't know, like so emotional, and like also made me feel so cool as like a third grader. Like
Mhm.
and ever since then, I was like I knew I had to do music, but I didn't know I could be involved in something like that. All I knew was like how to play like classical music at that point.
Yeah. So after you read that Wikipedia page in high school, do you automatically go out and buy a laptop and kind of start messing around, or when did you kind of start trying to produce?
Well, what was cool was when I figured that out, I was at Berklee College of Music, so they had resources there.
Mhm.
Um, so for those 5 weeks, I like couldn't get off of GarageBand on like one of the computers there, and then I realized that my parents were awesome for always having Macs. We were always like a Apple family, even when it wasn't cool.
Mhm.
So the Apple had GarageBand on it, and my dad had an old computer um, that he eventually lent to me. He got a new computer and didn't sell the old one, and let me put it in my um, walk-in closet. And I worked on GarageBand there, and then moved up to Logic from GarageBand, and yeah, we called it the Bat Cave. I would just have anyone in high school who wanted to like, I mean, I don't know why it was so hip hop oriented in St. Louis, but like it was like always like there were kids in my class who wanted to be like YouTube rappers or SoundCloud rappers, and I'd be like, I'll try and make beats. Come on over, I'll record you.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Do you still work out of Logic then since you started on GarageBand, or did you end up switching over to Pro Tools at some point?
that's exactly right. I switched over to Pro Tools. I became a recording engineer out in LA. So I moved out to LA, and I got a job as an intern at a recording studio called which is no longer in existence, which is really sad because it's a magic place.
Mhm.
Um, and in order to operate in that studio, you just had to learn Pro Tools. So I just grinded and tried to figure it out, and yeah, that became like my normal DAW.
Was there anyone cool you like worked with when you first moved out here that was kind of like your first like moment, like shoot, like wow, this is like dope?
The first week I was in LA interning at that studio. Maybe I'd been in LA for like 6 months, but I started interning. And the first week, Larry, who is still like one of my great friends to this day and owned the studio, called me and Weezer's in right now. Can you do this? And I was like, no, but yes. And I got it was pretty cool. It was like literally my um first time engineering was with Weezer. They were rehearsing for a tour, and they just wanted someone to record everything as they were rehearsing. So it was pretty low pressure, which was great. And then I think like the second thing I worked on was Adam Lambert. I remember recording Adam Lambert's vocals, and it was a demo for him, and I'm sure I did a terrible job, but he was nicest guy ever.
That's
And
insane.
yeah.
Now, did you go into this internship right out of high school, or did you end up spending some time in, like in college before that?
No college. There was this program I was in for 6 months called the Musicians Institute
Mhm.
out in LA. And I think actually, now that I'm filling in the blanks, that helped me learn Pro Tools a little bit too. So it was kind of a combination of the two.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What was your first kind of couple months in LA like networking? Like, what were you doing to kind of get your name out there?
Oh man. The first night in LA as an 18-year-old with all my most of my friends went to like Mizzou, which is like the normal college from St. Louis. It was like, what have I done? I
Mhm.
didn't know a single person. I didn't really make too many connections through Musicians Institute. It really took a long time before I had any. I had this plan because um, my friend's uncle was Larry, this guy who owned this recording studio, and I just figured at some point I could start interning there. That was pretty much my only contact. I really had no plan. I was still like on the internet a lot, so like a lot of the kind of like local rappers in the Midwest I was working with, I was still staying in contact with and making beats for at that time, which was
Mhm.
kind of cool. Um, but in LA, nobody.
Now, were you already writing like when you came out here, or were you only wanting to be like a producer engineer when you first came out?
I think I didn't even understand like what the roles really were, but I for hip hop, which is what I started doing, it was all I'm a rapper. I can write all the lyrics. I just need someone to make the beat.
Mhm.
So that's what I would do. I was just trying to get in where I could fit in, and I love making music in any regard. So I think I tried like writing some like hooks for some of the rappers, and they were into it and they always open to it. But normally it just didn't make sense for me to do that at that point.
Yeah. Now, an artist you've released a lot of music with is Bryce Vine. How did that like connection kind of come about? And do you have a
My
project
boy.
you've worked on that is like you're most proud of with him?
Um, Bryce, I met through. So later, I ended up signing to another producer, and he had signed Bryce, um, and so I started working with Bryce through that. I would say probably my favorite song we did together was a song called Glamorama. It's a really cool record based on a Bret Easton Ellis book, I believe. And I don't know, it's every single show I think I've ever been to of Bryce's. It's like the song where like he turns off all the lights and everybody puts their phones up,
Yeah.
and that's just like that's always just a cool. So I think that's probably my favorite, and I love the lyrics, and I think Bryce sounds amazing on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just wrote it together in the studio.
Now, what is this decision like to make the move from LA to Nashville? Kind of what made you come to that?
Some of the last projects I was working on in LA were super songwriter oriented.
Mhm.
Um, I got really into the songwriting craft over the past, 3 or 4 years, which is obviously a transition from like just starting making beats.
Mhm.
Um, and I think everyone would agree the best songwriters are in Nashville. That's where like the craft really is. So I'm kind of just chasing that sound, and I came out for a few months just to try it out, and I had this, you know, kind of thing in the back of my head of, well, if the songs are really that good, I'll stay, and they were.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even about genre or anything. It was just about people being good at a thing that I was passionate about.
Was there any writers that you knew from LA that were already in Nashville that you kind of started working with? Like I know like Ben Johnson was out here in LA before he came to Nashville. Like were you guys boys or working together or was there anyone else?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, man, half of the people on your show are like homies, and it's so cool that you're so deep into this little world in Nashville. Ben is like for sure one of my closest friends out here, and I think I met him maybe the second day I was in Nashville at I think he just had like a Fourth of July party on his rooftop. We were just grilling burgers, and it was through a collaborator named Fraser Churchill, who is definitely one of my closest friends also. He had moved from LA to Nashville about 6 months earlier, and he also had called me and been like, man, the songwriters out here and just the spirit of music out here is really special. You should come check it out. So Fraser really, I think the first session I did in Nashville was with Fraser and with another person you've interviewed, JB.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
that was like my first Nashville session. And yeah, I mean, he kind of connected the dots there, and all homies to this day.
Heck yeah. So a project you worked on this year was Hunter Hayes' project Red Sky. What was it like working
Yes,
with him? Like, especially he's a musician that can literally play any instrument known to man. What was that kind of process like working with him?
dude, that guy is a monster. It's like one of those things, and that was also part of like, wow, I got to be in Nashville because he lives in LA now. And when we worked together, it was so different from what I had been doing in LA, which I loved producing everything out on my own and making the entire track from scratch on my own. But Hunter was like one of these writers in LA where all you're trying to do is just record everything that he does as fast as possible on every instrument.
Hmm.
So like that song, I think was it Sober was the song that came out
Hmm.
with him so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've written a bunch together, and I think more will come out. But that one I remember, like literally just I did the drum programming on it, and then just boom, 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 like hit record as fast as you can because he's gonna play keys, he's gonna play guitar, he's gonna write this incredible hook. The guy's just a monster, and that was one of the things where I was like, man, I want to be around stuff like this, and I could tell that like the Nashville culture is. I would assume he would say that's part of what pushed him to be such a great overall technical creative. You know?
Hmm. For sure. Now I've seen on Instagram you've been working with Ben Burgess in the studio. Insane artist, writer. I mean, great guy too.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you guys' stuff has come out yet, but I'd love to know what his process is like in the studio, like as a writer and when you guys work together.
You want to hear a cool Ben Burgess story about a song that we did have come out?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the first time I met Ben Burgess was in Las Vegas. We're both signed to Warner Chappell at that time. Um, and these writing camps in Vegas, they're like absolute grinds. At minimum, you're doing 2 blocks of sessions a day.
Hmm.
So we walk into this studio, and they go, "Well, you're not actually in the recording studio. You're in the live room because we don't have enough space." And I was like, "Fine." One of my like favorite things to do is just build a studio anywhere and just like get to work. So I just set up my laptop, and it was me, Ben Burgess, Alex Delicata, and then Jeremy and Tim, who are a production duo, Kinetics and One Love,
Hmm.
um, and Ben. I don't know if I mentioned him yet. So we just started writing this joke song, and I don't know how much you know about Ben, but he is like a really goofy personality, and I don't know if somebody sensed it about him or if we just got lucky that we just were feeling goofy after being just cooped up in studios for 5 days in Vegas. And we wrote this kind of like dramatic jazz ballad. Um, and Ben sang this like super like bravado like chorus, and it was kind of a joke. And then we pitched it up an octave, and we pitched everything up, and then we were like, we got to make just a super hard hip hop beat that comes in after this. And it ended up being a song that we sent to Lil Wayne, and Lil Wayne sang the chorus and then rapped over it. And
Yeah.
Ben is still on the vocals and wrote the song.
That's crazy.
So the second we did that, we were like, okay, we're boys. And I think we're talking about doing an album together, and Ben's been helping with a ton of records that hopefully will come out soon. He's an amazing creative.
Now, is there any producers that you look up to yourself, like not only maybe their work, but kind of how they lead, like when you've seen them work in sessions?
That's a great question. I feel like I saw a ton of producers when I was an engineer. Um, because I got to watch all of them work. Unfortunately, typically producers don't see each other because we're running the session. We don't co-produce the same way co-writers always work with each other.
Hmm.
Um, and I always remember the only person I ever emailed when I was at the Lair, the recording studio, was Oak Felder.
Hmm.
I remember seeing him and being like, "Man, this guy's just dialed in top to bottom. He was working with Miguel, and I really admired the way he ran a session, and was able to do anything. Um, at this point, I feel like I really look up to people that I'm peers with and collaborate with. I'm learning so much from on a daily basis. I love co-producing with my buddy Christian Diamond Pistols. He's in LA, and I learn so much from him every time. At this point, I feel like it's always just people that I'm working with are just like, I assume I'm the dumbest person in the world, and I've in the room, and I've got lots to learn from all these people every time. So.
Yeah. Now, what is your creative process like for when you're songwriting? Since you're a producer, like, do you automatically go to your computer and start with a beat, or are you still doing like voice memos or kind of writing notes down on your phone?
So it's always changing. I feel like if it gets too formulaic, you kind of start to lose the magic.
Mhm.
The magic is always changing and challenging yourself and finding new ways to challenge yourself. Lately, though, I've been loving. I've just got this loops folder, and it's got like, I don't know. Let's see how many loops I've done in 2023. We're getting towards the end of the year. Okay, not as many as I thought. 168 loops. But
Wow.
that's a good amount. And so
Mhm.
I'm making. I mean, I was gonna say I make two or three at a time. So I mean, I guess that means I'm not doing it that often. But I love making these loops and then just clicking a random one and trying to like come up with a melody and then a few lyrics, and it's just kind of a seed. I like to do two or three of those before a session, and then when I bring it into the session, I've got like three three ideas, and then I may even listen to all my loops through and grab like eight more that we can just start from. Um, but I go in with that stuff ready to go, and then I'm also fully down to just like do something completely from scratch. Um, I'll normally in that case either have just a title or I'll have musical elements that I come up with in the room. But on the other end, I did a session last week where I had a full song written. And I just showed it. I was like, hey, I've got this title. It's a full song, it's a full production. What do you guys think of this? And all we did was just tweak it. It was a short session. It was an hour and a half, and we just tweaked it. It wasn't my agenda to just make them cut my song, but it just made sense.
Yeah. Now, as someone that's worked in LA and Nashville, what would you say the differences are in the writing room or in sessions in general?
Um, Nashville is much more clinical. It's all about, hey, let's get in, let's get right to work, let's um let's write a song. This is how it's gonna go, and let's get out of here.
Hmm.
Which right now I'm like loving. I'm loving like the balance of like life and songwriting. LA, it's so much more like a lifestyle and all consuming, and like people say they're 1 p.m. Who knows when they're actually going to show up, which I'm sure you've experienced.
Yeah.
Um, they may show up at 2:30. You're going to hang out for maybe hours before you start working, and it's much more about I guess like I mean it's so corny to say, but the vibe that comes through in the music and this just like atmosphere and an all-encompassing culture thing, LA's all about just grabbing culture from anywhere and figuring out how to put it into the music. Way more melody passes that are just kind of inspired versus like starting with a chorus. Way more beat driven and way more sonic driven. Those are a few of the things that I feel like separate LA from Nashville and are really fun.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so glad I spent time doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, for me coming from Nashville first, it's been weird to adapt to LA because I feel like you said, like you're in Nashville and it's more like, all right, we're in the writing room, we're gonna get to work. And then in LA, you said like they might show up late and then they might want to grab lunch first. But then like you said, it's all about setting up the vibe and then you end up getting to work, but it's definitely different than Nashville.
Sometimes you don't even end up getting to work.
Very true.
Yeah, it's like it's really like this whole lifestyle thing, which is it's cool. And it makes people believe the song in a different way. I think where Nashville is trying to make people believe the song through technical um, skill set, LA may be trying to make people believe the song through more just cultural influence and like real atmosphere.
Yeah. Now, I like to close my interviews by asking, what's a piece of advice that you've learned along your journey that you'd give to the aspiring musicians, songwriters, producers out there?
Someone once said to me that it's always more difficult than it looks from the outside. And I think that that is amazing advice. I think that everybody wants to just see this series of wins that they knock out and just climb this ladder. And it always looks like that. Even this story that I probably told today just talks about all the wins that I got. We don't want to talk about all of the disappointments that I've faced in an 11-year career at this point, because they're no fun to talk about. But there's lots of ugly sides to this, and you got to just push through it and celebrate the good times when they happen.